All right, everyone. Welcome once again to your Wednesday night webinar. My name is Dr. Patrick McGrath. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer here at OCD. OCD, a downloadable app. You can get through Google Play or iOS. We have teletherapy across the country, along with the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada as well, too. And it is an honor to have my very good friend, Dr. John Grayson, joining us tonight as well. John, so good to see you. How are you?
It's great to see you. Seems like it'll be fun to be here.
I hope so. I hope so. And boy, lots of stuff been going on in the world since you and I saw each other at a conference a while ago, and a few things, to address. First of all, I just reach out to our friends in Michigan and at Michigan State University, who we worked with. Obviously, a big stressor there, and we know OCD loves a stressor, so it will want to take advantage of something like that too. And in some ways, actually, it kind of links to why you and I started talking just a few weeks ago, when there was a newspaper article out about extremism and how maybe OCD is related to something like that. And we were fuming, weren't we, about that, and several of us. So.
To say the least. I mean, I feel like it's politically motivated to try to tie OCD to these kind of things, since, we know it doesn't have anything to do with them. It's people misusing terms and coming up with what they're calling research that actually isn't peer-reviewed research.
Yeah. I could go write an article about Mercury and the sun right now and call it research, but it doesn't mean that it's right or anything like that. But I could
only if
make
you
it
agreed
fancy.
with me.
Yeah, right. Of course. Yeah. Where was Mercury on your birthday, by the way? Was it rising or falling? That might affect this conversation. No, never mind.
It was up. It was up.
Okay. Well, John, most people in the world obviously of OCD or know who you are, but do you want to take a moment and just intro yourself? We'd love to, have you do that.
Oh, myself. Well, I mean, I'm kind of recent to coming into OCD work.
Brand new.
I've only been doing it since 1978.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I think you might have been born still.
Yeah.
I was. Okay.
I was. Absolutely.
And I was on some of the original research where pretty much the way we do exposure and response prevention was kind of laid out. I mean, I think we have made some improvements to it, but the core of what we do still goes back to that research, those research projects with Dr. Edna Foa, who kind of is the mother of us all in some respects of working with OCD. Currently, I'm in LA. In a practice, and I really love working with OCD, so I have no plans on retiring. So whenever.
So we'll keep having you at conferences and seeing great talks from you and everything like that. So that's awesome.
Till I drop.
Till you drop, right? May it be on a fun stage while doing a great talk about it. Never mind.
No, I was thinking during those Road to Recovery tours.
Yeah.
If I drop one of those, I could then become, I'd be dead, but I'd be legendary.
You would be legend.
So that's not necessarily the plan, but it's occurred to me.
As many things occur to us who do, ERP therapy of just things of that nature. And I've always joked with anyone it doesn't matter who you are. If we're on a stairway together, I'll think about pushing you down the stairs, just because I've treated so many people who have a fear of that. I can't take any stairs now without contemplating the ability of myself to push people down them. Right.
I think of that just on my own without the motivation of treatment. It'd be kind of cute, like what would happen, but right. The trouble is people don't recognize that those are like normal thoughts. It's
right.
Like I think people who a lot of people might have the thought and they don't realize it. But I always like to go back to Stephen King, who was once asked, "Why do you write about such horrible things?" And his answer was, "What makes you think I have a choice?" not that he has OCD, but thoughts
Mm-hmm.
of good and evil, and what's the evil in me and what's the good in me, are interesting to him. And because he's a writer, he writes about it. And to be a good writer, he has to actually think about, like, why would it be fun to kill some? He has to try to get in the mind so that
Yeah.
it'd be interesting. And we have a reason we know that everybody thinks like this.
Mm-hmm.
He's rich.
Yes. He makes money
like
from it. Mm-hmm.
yes, everybody. So the difference for a lot of our sufferers and him is that he writes stories and they try to do the impossible of stopping thinking.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think he's at risk for killing people.
I don't either. And I've often used that kind of reference, how some people have intrusive thoughts and come see me. Other people have them and make them into a screenplay and get millions of dollars for them. So
Exactly.
Is there much of a difference? Not necessarily, other than the belief behind, should I actually see this as bad or awful or horrible and do something about it? Or could I profit from it in some way?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So we have this article that's come out, and why you and I decided to be here together tonight. And again, thank you for that. So glad
Thank
to
you.
have you. When you first saw it, and obviously there were so many flaws, like you said, the research isn't peer reviewed. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, it means you don't just write something and it's taken for granted. You write something and then other people look at it, and then they kind of check your references and your math and your statistics and all these things, and they decide, yeah, this really has no merit whatsoever. This person just seems to have made correlations, or the other piece, correlation doesn't imply causation, right? Just because
Right.
you might be able to run a statistic and find a small relationship between things doesn't mean that one causes the other,
Right.
other in any way. So I'd love to hear your take on it, and kind of your message to the OCD community as well too. I think it would be wonderful.
I as you know me, I always talk about uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so, generally, if somebody wants reassurance from me, I point out that everything in life is the odds.
Right.
That there are high odds and low odds, and some things are likely low odds. But when you have OCD, you're not concerned. You're trying to make low odds into no odds.
Right.
So, if we're going to talk about this in a statistical way,
sure.
People with OCD, don't do this stuff. Like, will there someday be someone who does it? I'm sure. But in terms of, like, the data that these people are collecting, they're kind of conflating two different discussions. Saying that somebody who's thinking constantly about doing horrible things has OCD, and that kind of constant thinking doesn't make it OCD, as we know. And generally, with OCD, I'm made incredibly anxious by my thinking, because I'm really trying to wish or hope that something's not going to happen, and I'm terrified that it will. Whatever it is, whether I'm going to get sick from not washing my hands, how do I know I'm not going to slice and dice my wife tonight, and all of these horrible things that might happen. This category that they're making a case for, it's like, oh, but somebody who's thinking about it and likes it, somehow that's OCD. And how many different ways can we say it's not? That we do that, right. Since working with this in 1978, and then all my colleagues like you, we should have run into a bunch of these violent characters.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. I remember when I first worked with OCD, because I'm this old, it was thought to be a rare disorder.
Yeah.
And I knew before they did the international study finding out the frequency of OCD that was not true, because I talked to too many people who knew somebody with OCD.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, it can't be rare if I'm just talking to people and saying I work with this and they know it. And the same way, just that, and although that's not data, I don't know any of us who can say, I don't know anybody, although maybe we could find one of our colleagues who's run into somebody who has OCD and was dangerous. I'm sure there is somewhere in the world, but if this is an actual diagnostic category, so, these people are trying to take a problem and then basically call it OCD.
Yeah.
If I have, they describe what they call obsessive passion.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which I would still kind of potentially reject as a diagnostic category.
I didn't see it in the DSM when I looked at it again.
Right. No, and nor that, and I hate to bring politics into it, but it also felt like it had a kind of political edge to it, because it seemed like they pointed to all the things that were liberal and killers, killers and liberals, because they mentioned trans, they mentioned Greta Thunberg as like, they have this problem, So I think it's not only bad research. I'm kind of questioning whether there's a political motivation behind it on top of that. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, that was interesting. And one of the things too that I had never kind of put it together until last week. I said it on this webinar last week. OCD loves to make somebody an expert. Like, here's this person no one's really heard of much before, who wrote this one research paper that got cited by someone. So suddenly people with OCD might read that and go, oh my gosh, what if that's me? Because, hey, now that I found an article, this person must really know something that nobody else, or a therapist or anybody knew. Suddenly we have the expert, right? And there it is. But that's the Google search phenomenon for OCD too. I did 9,000 searches. I finally found something that kind of related to what I had. That must be it. That must be true. So I found the expert I was looking for, and now I found the expert.
Yeah, exactly. So, what we're most concerned with is that this is going to terrorize a group of people with OCD.
Yeah.
And although, again, I'm a pain in the neck, I say, well, maybe you're going to do that. But in terms of, are you probably going to do that? Obviously, obviously, when I give somebody my knife and I have them hold it over my wrist, I'm gambling. They could slice me up, and that would really suck for me. So far, I'm a good guesser.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but, and I do tell patients, the fact that I'm doing that doesn't mean that it's safe. I'm just betting, I'm playing the odds. But this article is changing that and making it seem like there's this other problem out there. I think in some ways it's kind of claiming to differentiate, in a sense, harm OCD from somebody who's like actively wanting to do things. But there's no data to make that connection. I might as well make alcoholism a form of OCD because, they're engaging in an addictive behavior. But it's not OCD.
Yeah, you can really be interested in something without having OCD, which may shock some people because we overuse the term obsessive and we overuse the terms compulsive too, right? So
exactly. Yes. When we use it, we, I hate jargon, but we have to be specific. For us, obsessive means not all the things that it means in public. It means these are the things that the person thinks of that frighten them.
Yeah.
Compulsive means these are things they think or do to try to get rid of those thoughts or feelings. Yeah. What this person's calling obsessive, there's that other meaning of obsessive, but that's not OCD.
Right. I've seen the band Rush 30 times in concert. You could say I was obsessed with Rush, as many of my friends did, but I would always correct them. Well, I
think it represents another problem with
well, it could. It could. Yeah.
But it's not OCD. It's not OCD.
Some it's good taste, and some it's maybe not so good taste in music. Who knows what it is? Yeah. But yes, and even the word compulsion gets overused too. I would argue it's not compulsive gambling; it's impulsive gambling or shopping or things like that. That might be a better phrase to use than compulsive, because I like to reserve the term compulsion for the neutralization of an obsession. So.
Right. And if I ran the world, I would try to enforce what you're saying.
Wait, you don't? I thought you did. No? Oh, okay.
It's secret.
Oh! I wasn't supposed to let that.
Yeah, I'm part of the 5% of ruling everything. They haven't been giving me my percentage. I'm a little pissed off. But if we're going to have to deal with the fact that people say compulsive across the board, what we're stuck doing is saying it has multiple meanings. But if you're going to say OCD, it means this.
Yeah.
And you're talking about compulsive in the sense of gambling, drinking, sex. It means something else.
Very different. Yes.
And in a way that just kills the entire argument that this guy makes. It's like you're conflating two terms. You're taking general language and saying this is what it is, and doing kind of crappy research and coming up with something that seems to be poorly done study, not peer reviewed. I think of it as what I call a GIGO study, GIGO.
Okay.
It's GIGO is a term for computers, software, and it stands for garbage in, garbage out.
There you go. Yeah.
They don't really have what they're claiming. And shame on the newspapers that print stuff like this.
Right.
Shame that they didn't call the OC Foundation. How do you publish an article like that and not just back it up to say hey, what does the OC Foundation think about this? Let's talk to the major professionals in the field.
Right.
So yeah, it pains me the disservice because I think as right, for so many people with OCD, it's so hard for them to find good treatment to start with that I hate to see this extra burden on those people with what we call harm obsessions, and
sure.
I guess unless you want to do it, when we're saying harm obsessions, I gather if there are listeners who are not in the OCD world out there hearing it, sounds what do you mean harm obsessions? And a harm obsession is simply I have a thought I'm wondering, a thought about I could harm someone, and I decide oh my God, I don't want to have this thought. So again, going back to what's normal, seeing a new baby, it's normal to think about killing it. People say what? But everybody says oh, look at this cute little baby. It's so small and helpless, which is kind of thing as well, small and helpless. And I could do something, I could do something.
I could
normal.
Drop it.
I could drop it.
I could soft spot in the back of the head,
Yeah, I guess I could throw it across the room. I could do all these things to it. And the thing is, people without OCD do one of two things. They're going, the thought comes and they go, well, that's weird. And they just push it out of their head immediately. Or they don't, so they don't even notice it. Or they have the thought, it's all right, that's weird. But the other thing they don't do is almost everybody knows, because, you don't say this to a new mom. Right. Your baby's so cute, it'd be so easy for kill. And of course, when my grandson was born and I'm holding it, and my kids know what I do.
Yeah.
But I knew, despite that, what they know what I do, not the time to make this statement of wow, I could kill Jack. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I know not to say that.
Yeah.
But
a rare instance of you holding back, by the way, but still
incredible. Yeah, if anybody's impulsive, yes. But it would be you and me, I have to say.
I think we'd be neck and neck on that. Yeah.
But I mean, but the thing about the thought is, the person with OCD isn't thinking I could kill this baby. Wow, wouldn't that be great? To see, they don't have any fantasy like that. They're going oh my God, why am I thinking that? And of course, as soon as you try not to think something, you have to think it, because the only way to not think a thought is to think it. I know I hate the pink elephant. I like to have my people. I always talk about try to drive and not notice any black cars while you're driving.
Yeah. I used a similar, buy a car and then try not to see that car on the road, right?
Yes. Yeah. So and the person, in thinking it's not normal, they torture themselves and think I'm evil, and they have the thought more because of that, and then they try to avoid the thought, and so they find more ways to do that, and they don't think about things like half the TV shows on TV are about violence. Again, people are. It actually makes us feel safe to watch shows. We are vicariously trying to feel safe. And the shows, they get the bad guy, and that makes us feel oh, good, they got the bad guy, I'm safe. If there's a killer around, we're much more comforted if we find out they're not random, that they had specific targets, and there's a reason. Random killers we do not like, especially. So
that's what made MSU so difficult, I think, for a lot of people, right?
Yes.
No rhyme or reason on that one at all. Yeah.
Exactly. So here we are, trying to help people with OCD. If they say, if somebody's gonna say to me, I could be like that guy, and it's I would just ask, well, tell me how much fun you would see to blow a hole in somebody's head and watch them, with terror before you shoot them, and then watch the blood pouring out. Usually, people go, ah, comforting for me, and it's well, I don't know what you'll be like tomorrow.
Right.
today it seems like you're cool.
Mm-hmm.
Today it seems like your risk of doing these horrible things is about the same as mine.
Yep.
Because actually, having OCD doesn't put you at greater risk.
Nope.
So I might go crazy, do it. You might go crazy and do it. Having the thoughts doesn't make you more likely to. I don't know how many times we can repeat this the same way.
I loved when I had staff who we would be treating someone at the IOP program who were afraid they would hurt children. And we had some staff who had babies, and they would bring their babies into work, and they would hand their baby to these people and say, "I'll be back in an hour. Just watch them." And then they'd go treat other patients, and this person be holding the child for an hour, right?
Yeah, you remind me, I did something like that, but I didn't have any of my own babies or staff babies, and I had friends who were not psychologists down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew their daughter who just had a baby was visiting.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, I have a patient who's afraid of babies. Can I borrow your baby?" I did not mention her actual fear is killing babies.
Yeah, right.
So they lent me the baby, and I left it with the patient, and luckily she didn't kill the baby, and luckily my friends aren't listening to this show probably, so they're never going to know.
And it brings up interesting too, because we get questions in our feed here, and some related. Let me just run one past you, kind of just get some ideas here. So, like, one is from Logan. Can you talk about the current trend of manifesting and how that can be triggering for OCD sufferers? My OCD doesn't allow me to say or write certain words for fear of manifesting them into existence. So when people talk about manifesting or speaking things you want into existence because it worked for them, it only feeds into my mental compulsions about not doing it. I think about just on Monday with Stacy, we were doing the OCD SUD webinar, and we invited all demons and devils into the webinar to sell our souls off at the end too for an auction. None showed up, but we also did not seem to manifest them at all too. But OCD loves to catch on trendy things, even like this, right?
I makes me head explode when people talk about the manifesting things. Because I think the reason it sells so well, at first it's really it seems like a very promising. I can have everything I want. I can just think about the good things. Actually, it's pretty evil, since obviously it doesn't work you don't get the manifest. So it ends up being very much a blame thing of like, well, you're not getting it because like you just don't, you're doing something wrong. So now it's like you're responsible for all the bad things happening. And for the manifesting to be true, a few other things have to be true. During the Holocaust, all the children who were killed must have wanted to die in some way, because they were all killed. So if you want to have that belief that manifests that, that's fine. I think it's a low probability event. So there's so many people wishing death. I did do some witchcraft rituals during the thing where I tried to kill a particular political figure. I thought it'd be kind of interesting if it actually happened. But the figure didn't die, so But I did tell the client, like, if it happens, we don't know if it's coincidence or one of us did it.
Right.
And it's funny you talk about the manifesting, because one of the things that I've done when I want people to understand OCD, I'll take audiences and I'll say, I can give you the experience of having OCD, and I'll ask them, I'm doing it with professional time. I'll say, okay, get a piece of paper. I want you to write this. I want to put down the name of somebody you love. Now write to die a horrible, painful death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do the same. Mm-hmm.
I figured. I could tell by the smile on your face as I was speaking. And all I know, and I'll ask some people, where they're willing to carry that in their pocket for a week. For their first response, it's like, no. It's like, why not? Like, what if my spouse finds out or whatever? I say, well, you can tell them why you're doing it.
Right.
What if somebody goes to my wallet? Like, how often do people go in your wallet? Anyway, I haven't caused a swath of death yet from that. From having that thought. So I think our thoughts are so random, and yeah, it's really sad. I mean, this person who's trying to control their thoughts, where they're not, they don't want to have a bad thought, and the fact is, there's no way to do that, and there's no, technically, if I have a thought like that, can I unmanifest it?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is the magic in the universe? I really, when people have this problem, I actually have a number of spiritual talks with them because I would like to know about what is their underlying belief system. Is it a very simple, straightforward, I manifest whatever I think? Do you believe in God or not God? And it's like this, how does the universe work?
Yeah.
In the end, the answer, there's a correct answer. And the answer is whatever you pick, it's a guess and you can't prove it.
Right.
If I say I believe in God, I can't prove it. If I say I don't believe in God, I cannot prove there's no God. So we make a bunch of guesses, and I ask them, why don't you pick the guesses that seem to make sense to you? You might be wrong, but there's no way to know if you're right. But I feel there'd be certain things very different in the world with regard to manifesting. I mean, I think there are a lot of people wishing Putin would drop dead, because what he's doing in Ukraine, and I feel like it's probably a larger group than in Russia because we have the whole Western world not liking him, and like he's not dropping dead.
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand why not. And if there are more Russians than I really am thinking about, keeping Putin alive, then I don't know why Zelensky's not dropping dead.
Yeah.
Except I feel like it's not really. It seems to not be predictable enough for us to bet on.
Sure. And if it was the case with betting too, then all we would need to know in Vegas is the number of people rooting for Team A versus the number of people rooting for Team B, and whichever had more fans would be the winner, and then you would bet on that team because
And just as an aside, being from Philadelphia, clearly the world wanted the Eagles to win, and that didn't work. For example,
right? Yeah,
it did not manifest. So
not enough manifesting going on.
Yeah. Despite the fact that they were obviously, the smart choice in terms of desire.
And people still come up to me at the conference about this because I've used it in talks all the time. I have a card in my wallet that says, I hope my parents die tonight, please God. And there's a 666 on the card as well, too. And it's been in my wallet now for 17 years. And my parents know it's there. And they just ask me once in a while. And then they say, well, screw you. We're still alive. So there, it is what it is. Right. So now here's the thing, John. One day that card's going to be right.
Yes, it's like a broken clock.
Yes.
Yes.
So, but I don't believe that because I wrote that. Because I think even if I hadn't wrote that, it would still be right anyway. Even if I had.
I have what I call the 3-house rule.
The 3-house rule. I like
though it's a little bit different. Let me describe it in a different example. A woman came to me, and it's relevant to the manifesting. She heard about a study poorly done about people being prayed for hospitals did better than people not being prayed for. Problems with the study, but she correctly concluded that if this study is accurate, if people can be helped by thoughts, they can be harmed by thoughts. So she spent 24/7 trying to make sure she had no killing thoughts. And when she came to me and said, I have this fear, I said, well, maybe you can kill people with your thoughts, but we know you have a low hit rate. Because today she hadn't killed anybody. So in treatment, we're going to have you work on killing people with your thoughts. Now, we're not doing this to prove that you can't. We're doing it because you're making yourself crazy trying not to. Exactly. So somebody might die. And if they die, you don't get to know whether it was a coincidence or not. I want you to stay in treatment. Let's say you knock off a second person. Yeah. I still want you to stay in treatment. If you can knock off 3 people, it's got to be 3 separate occasions. You knock off a busload of people, I'm just counting that as one. Mm-hmm. You do 3 separate people on 3 separate occasions. All right, you know what? We're going to talk about what to do about your thoughts. Contact the CIA. They'll probably have some use for you.
Exactly.
First week of treatment, we worked on killing her father. Mm-hmm. He died at the end of the week.
Okay.
Did she kill him with her thoughts?
Or did the disease he have? Who knows? Yeah.
He didn't have it. He wasn't expected to die.
Oh, he just died. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the answer is I don't know for sure. I think probably not. But she stayed in treatment. No one else dropped dead, and she got better. And so it's like all research, we need to see repetition.
We need repetition. Yeah. I had a one-time power.
Well, so did she. But go on.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I was very angry that there was a guy cutting a tree down in our backyard. It was dying, but it was the tree I climbed all the time. And he was a free climber, cutter, downer. He just climbed the tree with a chill on. And I was so mad. I was looking out the window and I just kept saying, I hope you fall out of the tree. And he fell out of the tree. So now, any other time since I was 4, when that happened, I see people in trees. I too still wish for them to fall out of trees. It's never happened again. So, like your patient, it was a one-time power to be
right,
infused.
right, and you know, and you never get to know coincidence or not.
Right.
We assume coincidence just because we can't prove anything else.
Yeah. There's no coincidence in OCD though, right? There's only.
Well, that's what I said. I said we assume. You know, it's like I want to see repetition and
exactly.
So, in terms of manifesting, outside of people asking for your money, we don't really see any solid evidence that there's a predictable kind of manifesting going on.
I like what you said too about suggestibility. I always use the example of I could start talking about lice for the next 2 minutes, and most people listening and watching will start scratching their hair within the next 2 minutes if I start to talk about lice and it biting on your scalp and all sorts of things like that, right? So yeah, it's very, very easy to do that. Let's pull another question. This week, all I've been able to think about is how much I suck at things, and I don't learn tasks as easy as others. Is this still OCD? And if so, what kind of exposure would I be? Well, first of all, go ahead. You jump in.
Well, I was going to say it's an easy question.
Yes, go. Please take it.
Because it seems clear that you probably have not very good self-esteem. And when I say not good self-esteem, I don't mean like you're a defective human being and treatment will turn you into a human being. I mean, you probably have a messed up way of looking at yourself that's misinterpreting things. Is it OCD? I don't know much about your OCD. Something like this can be a part of OCD. It can be separate from OCD. And either way, it needs treatment. You know, but it may not be a matter of simple exposure because we have to, you know, I suspect that even if it is conflated with your OCD, that you still like pretty much hate yourself and don't think well of yourself, which I think is a bigger problem. And I hate to give a plug for someone else's book, but I'm going to plug Kimberly Quinlan's book.
We like Kimberly.
No, I love Kimberly. Yeah, and no, I don't really hate her. Kimberly wrote a book called The Self-Compassion Handbook for OCD. Yes. I normally hate books like this because I feel like they're just too nice in telling people like feel good, and it's almost like saying to somebody with OCD, your problem is you worry too much. You need to stop doing that. It's like, great, how do I do it?
Wait, that doesn't work? Hold on. Wait, are you saying that doesn't?
No, it's another secret.
Never mind.
And I feel like her book is a much more real approach that gives people real exercises. She does use a few too many exclamation points, and I've told her that. But it's a real book, not like, oh, you know, flowers and unicorns, and this is just, you know, just be nice to yourself. So I think that could be a useful part for this person, but not everything.
There's another one similar to that, and I like this. Reminds me of an ERP I did back when I was with Alec. Someone says, I obsess over insults. Even the smallest slights can send me into a spiral or a comment relentlessly for days. Is there advice on how to handle this? I remember someone who came in who was just repeating constantly all the insults that he'd ever heard from his 5 older brothers. He was just picked on relentlessly by them as the youngest kid. And we ended up making a loop tape of a 2-minute long diatribe of every word and name and phrase he was ever called. And after 5 hours of listening to it in a row, nonstop, he was laughing and saying, I can't believe I've let these words rule my life for 20 years. They're stupid. Like, yeah, that's exactly. But what had happened for the last 20 years, probably what you would say, all he tried to do was every time they happen, get them out of his head, stop them, ignore them, counteract them, and all the mental judo he was attempting to do to wrestle these things without realizing these can't actually hurt me at all unless I allow them to.
Right. And just what's exactly his question?
Just, is there advice on how to handle this? And so for me, the advice would be, I would do ERP to the very insults, and I would teach myself to not care about the insults anymore.
Well, I mean, I think that's a big goal. I mean, you know, I think one of the troubles when anybody's asking us advice, I mean, you always know it's going to be ERP.
Yeah.
I would always argue that I have to know what I'm expecting from my ERP and what it means. So I need to know what these insults mean to this person? Like, is he hearing the insult and is he afraid they're true and trying to convince himself it's not true? Is he hearing the insult and being really angry at that person and trying to like how dare they say that? So I need to know what his compulsion essentially is, because that tells me the meaning of the obsession for him, and kind of what he has to risk by doing that. If he's trying to convince himself they're not true, that's kind of different than if he's if he's really angry at them. I would hope if he's angry at them, he would have the goal of learning that he's going to have to let people think whatever they want about him. But I said learning, like, I can't just say like, well, who cares what they say? Stop it. It's a learning process that would be painful. And while I'm talking, you can think of the exposure he could do that would help him with that. Versus if he's afraid they're true, in which case
Sure.
I have to kind of go like, well, it might be true. It might be true. How would I live with it if it's true? And it depends on the nature of the insults.
Sure. I remember for people with social anxiety, we would find out all the things they were afraid people might think of them.
Mm-hmm.
We would write them down on a piece of paper. Then we would hand them out face down in a group, and we would ask each person to look at the paper. We'd put the person with social anxiety in the middle of the room and point to a person and say, all right, you're thinking this about me. And so now we're asking these people to purposely think this about the person. And
Right.
They're the words they've already said. And they could never guess which one had actually gotten the right piece of paper. They still couldn't do it, right?
Right.
It still wasn't right. So
yeah.
Do we know, or do we tell ourselves that we know and we believe that to be true?
Right. We have this feeling. So he could also read Kimberly's book.
Yeah. I
just in this case, I feel like there's and again, he's not with us to answer, but I feel there's some assumption that like either it's unfair or he believes them or both.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd want to know that, is he demanding that everybody be fair? That would be hard.
Yeah, fair. We could do a show on the word fair in and of itself if we wanted to. Yeah. Here's one right up your alley, John Grayson. Ape King 22 says, how do you fight off intrusive thoughts and let go of an intrusive thought that won't let go?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all,
that is a Grayson question right there.
Yeah, first of all, we would argue,
yes.
and I can say I'm going to read your mind. We don't think of thoughts as intrusive. I think of thoughts as normal, because when we look at the nature of thoughts of all kinds, we see that non-sufferers have the same thoughts as sufferers. Mm-hmm. And letting go of an intrusive thought. When I have that goal, I'm ensuring I'm never going to get better. I can't do the demonstration now. I was thinking of it. So when I think about this person, let me just ask. I'm going to ask two questions, which he can't answer. But like one is, imagine you had this intrusive thought. It's hammering at you. And I'm saying to you, it's good, for the next 5 minutes, it's going to slam you like unbelievably. And for some magic reason, at the end of 5 minutes, it's going to stop. Mm-hmm. How would you cope with that? I'm suspecting this guy would say, by the way, I love the Captain America thing. I would say that this guy would say, 5 minutes I could put up with. I say, that's amazing. Yeah. Because that first 5 minutes is the same whether it's 5 minutes or 5 hours. And yet there's something about that knowledge that changes everything. And so that's kind of cool because, I don't think it's just that it's only 5 minutes, because I feel confident if I subject you to the worst torture I can, 5 seconds isn't going to be terrible at 5 minutes. I would then ask another question. Imagine your loved one, whoever, wife, mother, whatever, died 3 weeks ago. Would thoughts of them pop in your head? Would those thoughts be upsetting? Would it interfere with what you're doing? I assume the answer is going to be yes. And would you and most people consider that an obsession? And they would say no. And I would say these two situations I described, the death of a loved one and the 5-minute situation, are the same. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Then we have dramatic pause while the person is trying to figure out, what do you mean the same? And because in both cases, without realizing it, you made a decision. In the case of the 5 minutes, you basically all right, for 5 minutes, I'll let it be there. In the case of a loved one, that's normal, so it's okay if it's there. right after 9/11, I asked this question about 9/11 to a group, and and then I end up, people think it's an obsession. Only one guy thought it was an obsession. He differed from the group. He said, I can't stand the thoughts. I don't want to think about the people jumping out of the building and all, and going on and on and on. And of course, 1 week after 9/11, good luck not thinking about 9/11.
Right.
So the question is, we're not trying to get rid of them. We're trying to learn how to live with them. Now,
Yes.
I say learn because, somebody said, oh, just let the thought be there. I hate that, because if you could, if you knew how to do that, it would be all. It is a learning process.
Of course.
And it's also an acceptance process, because people's first thing is like, I can't live like that. You can learn to live like that.
Yeah.
You can learn to allow it to be there and not care about it.
Right.
But that will take work. That will take exposure. And so part of the reason why we would, so I would, like you, I would probably have a tape playing that intrusive thought 24/7, or if it was or if there are a few different thoughts, I'd have a tape that just said thought. So it could be whichever thought's bugging you right now. And the tape would say that every 30 to 50 seconds. Why? Because it reminds them you're trying to learn to live with it. And we're making it impossible to forget. Because if I say it's okay with you want it to be okay if the thought's there, if it blows out of their head for a little bit, the person's going to, like, when it pops in there, like, oh my God, it's there again. It's kind of automatic to hate that. Whereas the tape is on. All right. Yeah, I have this tape on because I am trying to learn to cope with it. Obviously, that's no olive treatment, but the idea that I have to get rid of it or let it go, and that means it's not going to be there. Again, it's like the death of a loved one. It's not like you get to say, like, okay, I don't really want to think about this anymore, Or again, but if you could do it, if you believe you could do it for 5 minutes, you might have to consider, how do I learn to get in that 5-minute frame of mind? Not that it's gonna be over, but that something made it a lot more tolerable.
Yeah. John, my tinnitus won't let go for the last 22 years.
I have tinnitus also.
Yeah, it won't let go. It won't stop sending that stupid sound to me at all for 22 years. So should I fight it off, or do I have to learn to live with tinnitus as I've done? Right.
I love my tinnitus, because it lets me put my, my only complaint with tinnitus, if you describe somebody with OCD that you have tinnitus and go like, oh my God, I couldn't put up with that. And I'm thinking, seriously, this is a loud noise. This is way easier to cope with than anxiety. Anxiety is way more aversive. But yeah, I have tinnitus so much that when I got my hearing aids, I drove the guy crazy. He asked me about tinnitus. I said, yeah, so I can get rid of that. I said, no. He said, no, I really can. I said, yeah, no, and I said, yeah, I know exactly what you do. Like, I have no interest. I don't want you to do it. By the way, most of the time I have my tinnitus and like it is there constantly, but I forget that it's there.
Right. But it's there really loud now.
Until some idiot brings it up. Right. And now I hear my tinnitus.
Yeah.
Actually, honestly, and I think you're saying the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing a high pitched whine right now. I don't really care. Mm-hmm. I've learned I've learned that it can be there and not interfere. So it is a learning process.
Yes.
And so treatment would be very similar to that. I'd have a tape reminding them of their tinnitus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could be enjoying a lovely day out, on a hike, and someone will say, God, it's so quiet out here.
Exactly.
Right. That. Yeah. There's no good way to deal with it. And
there is. There is what you're doing. It's like
what you're doing.
I'm allowing. I've learned to allow it to be there. Again, I don't want to just say let it be there, because that's passive. It is work, and it's acceptance. People always think acceptance sounds great. Acceptance sucks.
Yeah,
it's something. It seems like it's the second best life, but that's the first step of getting to that. Like, all right, I'm going to hear tinnitus forever. You heard a lot of denial at the beginning of the pandemic. This can't go on all summer, really.
Yeah,
probably can. They say it's going to be 2 years till they find a vaccination. I can't put up with it. You did, but their initial thought is, I can't put up. I can't. It would be healthy to think like, all right, how am I going to cope with this, as opposed to I can't.
Yeah, can't versus won't is the discussion I love to have with people. Yeah. If you can't do it, I'm not going to be very helpful to you. If you won't do it because you're afraid or you haven't learned how to do it, I can be very, very helpful to you in that. Is there?
Right.
But I haven't yet figured out how to help somebody do something they can't do.
I know. Yeah, I have that problem too. It's one reason, I have a rule about exposure. Generally, I think exposure should be something a dead person can't do.
Yeah.
So it's for that reason I won't treat dead people, because they're good
Yeah.
at response prevention, but they suck at exposure.
They
So
should.
I just refuse.
Mike says, if you truly have OCD, you will doubt everything McGrath and Grayson are telling you right now.
That's fine. No, wait. That is fine. Doubt is normal. Doubt is a good thing.
I know. Yeah. That's why there's three smiley faces on it.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. Doubt is the core of creativity. What if is creativity? And, unfortunately, anything's possible. Some things are more likely than others, and everything is a guess. And you get to find out the answer to your guess when it's too late. You get married, you think it's going to last forever. You're divorced in 5 months. I guess you guess wrong. You're divorced in 50. You don't divorce 50 great years. I guess not. You have 5 good years followed by 5 years of hell. I don't know what you call it, but you don't get the answer in your day. So success is not making the right guess or decision.
Right.
Success is coping with the consequences of whatever decision you made.
Oh, I've used that here on the show. So my wife gets a cancer diagnosis a year after we're married and dies 5 years after that. Should I not have married her?
Right.
Right. I've always said you only know if a decision was a good or a bad one after you finally made it. Right. Never before. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's why I said, so success is coping with the consequences of whatever decision you made.
Right.
That's all we can, that's all we can do in trying to find a way to cope.
Yeah. And did living with someone who had cancer, was that fun? No. But what did we do? We figured out a way to cope with it until she passed.
Right. And you got to love her.
Yeah. And she knew she was loved, right? And she knew she was cared for by someone who took care of her, and family and friends that surrounded her for the last 5 years of her life. So, I'm not going to take it back. I'm not going to wish to take it back. But here's a good thing for OCD. Were there days that I wanted to just like bash my head against a wall? Yeah.
Sure.
100%. Were there days we were furious at each other? Absolutely. And did I have guilt about that? Of course. And have I learned to live with it? 100%.
I feel something applies to you that I feel a little bit. I think it's because you've coped with so much and done so well. I feel like you have more right to say what I'm about to say.
Sure.
So I'll let you tear me up or accept it.
I'll likely accept it. But
At the beginning of the pandemic, Kathy and I were going on our pandemic walk.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And Kathy said to me, God, this would be such a good day if all this wasn't happening. And I said, you're wrong, Kathy. We should let all listeners know, not fun being married to a psychologist. I said, it is a great day.
Yeah.
We're together. We have each other. It's a beautiful day and all that. And it sucks that this is happening. And I think true acceptance is not either or, it's and. What else is happening?
Yeah.
And so, because we don't have a choice.
Right. I saw a amazing lecture once. A psychologist was talking about when he married his wife, and he said, I loved her, and I got down on one knee, and I had the ring, and I said, I can't live without you. Will you marry me? And her response was, I can live without you, but I don't want to. And I'm just like, oh man, that was good.
I wasn't sure if it's like, guess you're gonna die.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But if we're going to be okay for all sorts of other people having whatever thoughts or images or urges that they have, and we can excuse them for anything, but we don't for ourselves, and we create what I call specialness, then the rules of the world apply to me differently than they do to everybody else. We're sadly shortchanging ourselves and not allowing for our humanity, but it's okay for everyone else to be a human.
Right. And that double standard, which as psychologists, we always wish that when we point it out, it would fix everything.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. But the one thing I often do that kind of begins to break that is like, give an assignment, go home and write a justification why this applies to you and no one else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I think people hear that and it's like, yeah, I have a double standard, but it doesn't change that feeling. So it's like, okay, justify it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and it's got to be like, you know, 3 or 4 paragraphs to explain why this, and that often helps break it, because it's one thing to hear the statement, it's another thing to try to prove the statement.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to say, yeah, I know it's not, I know it doesn't make sense, but I feel it. It's like, all right, well, let's try to go beyond that.
We have a request. Is there any way I can convince the two of you to start a regular podcast? Just so you know.
Thank you. I'm probably, I'm probably, I just starve for attention. So, I would probably be pretty easy. Patrick has more sense than I. I mean, he has a regular podcast, but he has more sense than I. So, I don't know if he's convincible, but.
Well, I think it would be fun. So maybe
okay.
Maybe we'll have some chance about that.
Sounds good. Thank you. And thank you, Captain.
Yes. I like Julie's question here. Can you talk a little bit about avoidance as a compulsion? Avoidance as a compulsion is one of the reasons it took me so long to get a diagnosis.
I mean, I think it can be. I mean, it depends. If we're talking jargony, sometimes we refer to avoidance as a passive avoidance, meaning like I don't, like I stop living life basically. Like, I don't want to wash my hands, so I don't go to certain places.
Exactly.
I mean, she's right. And I'm not sure what she was avoiding. I'm assuming she was avoiding going to a doctor or whatever to get a good diagnosis, but it certainly plays a role. I mean, we want people to go out and be living, and so for some people, simply living is an exposure.
Yeah. I had a fascinating conversation, John, and it involved some people on our team, and we were debating the word diagnosis, right? And some people didn't like it, and I was like, yeah, but we're psychologists, we're trained, we give diagnoses and everything. And then I was talking to Chrissy Hodges too, and I said, what's wrong with the word diagnosis, right? And she said, there are people who are afraid to go to a psychologist or therapist and be told they don't have OCD, because if they don't get the diagnosis, then it means they really are the thing they were afraid of, right? And I was like, wow, that was kind of mind-blowing in a sense to hear from that angle. I thought it was fascinating, right? It's like, man, that really makes a ton of sense to me now. Why, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't with this disorder. And even in just getting diagnosed with it, it could start there.
I mean, and I've seen it certainly work the other way, where people don't want to have OCD.
Right.
We're talking about acceptance and all. I said acceptance sucks. Psychologists talk about denial a lot, and most psychologists have trouble defining denial. I would say denial occurs whenever I compare reality to a fantasy I prefer. Like in the case of COVID, like this can't happen all summer. I don't want that, so I'm just saying it can't happen. And I'm comparing like the way I think it should happen. And fantasy, when I compare reality to fantasy always wins, because I don't put any garbage in the fantasy. But the fantasy also never comes true.
Right.
So acceptance, yes, that there are certain things in life I really don't like. And one reason to work towards acceptance is, one, I don't have a choice. And two, certainly if I'm talking about OCD, it's not like the rituals work. The people are doing all this work and you don't even get the prize.
Right.
So, and I always ask people when doing exposure, kind of an acceptance question, why would I take this risk?
Yeah.
Whatever I'm afraid of happening. And let's go through the reasons. How's it hurting you? How's it hurting your loved ones? How's it preventing you from being the person you want to be? So I think exposure ends up being a little bit more complex. It's not just doing this scary thing. It's like, I'm also reminding myself why I'm doing it, what I expect to get from it, and when I'm thinking about loved ones, it's partially like exposure becomes an act of love. It's like, I'm doing this so I don't mess up my children.
Yeah.
I'm scared. So I think this idea of acceptance, it's very difficult, because it's not like, oh, Zen happy land. It's like, I'm willing to live the second best life. I'm willing to live the life where I say and instead of or.
Mm-hmm.
And the best reason is it's not like you have a choice.
Yeah. It kind of goes with this question. I'm about thoughts and images. What if I act on the image? It will get stuck in my head, therefore making it impossible to enjoy life or live in the moment. But I'd contend OCD also prevents you from enjoying life and living in the moment either. So you could not enjoy life and not live in the moment doing what OCD wants you to do, or you could be afraid that the thing you're afraid of will come true and not enjoy life or in the moment. But at least you have 100% guarantee, I would say, of not really enjoying your life with OCD. You have a chance of enjoying your life by doing the opposite of what OCD wants. The only other thing I say is, sometimes I say it on here too, you could think about death that way too. You could spend the rest of your life sitting next to your tombstone wondering when you'll be 6 feet under it, or you could party like a rock star on the day of your death, show up at your tombstone saying, man, that was a lot of fun, and now I go 6 feet under.
And of course, she comes up with this issue of, I don't want the image stuck in my head. And of course, we'd be saying, I want you to learn to live with the image stuck in your head.
Yeah.
Because in a way, that's normal.
Yeah.
Regardless of how awful it is.
Yeah. I've got some crappy images in my head, right?
Yes.
And I can still enjoy life. I'll go back to Susan. I was next to her the moment she died. I have the image of her not breathing anymore. I can still enjoy my life while I carry that image inside of me as well too.
Right. It's right. There's good things and there are things that suck, and you live with both. Yeah.
So I like what you said. It's not yes or. You think of improv. It's yes and in improv, right?
Yes.
It's not I present yourself like yes or and let's go this way. It's we're going to build on that and we're going to do more with that and more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
John, before we go, I know we're kind of at our time here, but I loved your AU. And I just wondered if we could maybe end on that and you could share that with everyone, because I think it's just really great stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind. Mm-hmm.
Well, this isn't, I don't have it here anyway. It's a podcast just verbal, or is it visual?
This is visual. Yeah, this will be on YouTube and everything. People will be able to see.
And I don't have my prop. If only I knew you were going to do that.
Well, now that we'll do this more often, obviously.
Yeah. But I contend that exposure and response prevention is not the gold standard of treatment. That it's missing the gold. And so that rather than saying ERP, I think our treatment should be ERP plus gold. But that's, ERPs, it looks awkward, so I feel like it should all be written in initials.
Yeah.
And for those who, so it just so happens that the chemical symbol for gold is AU. So I think, if we're talking about the gold standard, it's ERP plus AU. And AU happens to also stand for accepting uncertainty. Thank you, Patrick.
Bravo. Love that. Yeah. And I hope all of us leave tonight knowing that that's something that we're really, really wanting to work on doing. So, John Grayson, as always, it has been a joy to spend an hour with you.
Likewise. It's always good to be with you.
And I hope we do this again. There's lots of requests here at the end for us to keep doing this. So,
Patrick, in this case, it is definitely out of my hands and in yours.
I will. Well, I'm going to reach out to you very soon, and we're going to see about scheduling some more of these. All right, John?
Sounds like fun.
Everyone, thank you for joining us on your Wednesday night webinar sponsored by NoCD. And also check out John Grayson's work too. He's got some great stuff online and books out on OCD and lots of good talks. And, it's everywhere. Come see him at the OCD Foundation Conference. We'll both be there in July.
I'm even on the NoCD channel.
You are, because you've done some stuff with us too as well.
Yes.
And now this will live on the NoCD YouTube channel, John, as well too. So
okay.
that'll be awesome. So, everyone, have a great night. We'll see you soon.
Take care.